Good morning, everyone. Erica, thank you so much for such a wonderful welcome. Again, good morning. And today's conversation really focuses on, I think, really just one major topic, which is character. And in preparation for today's discussion, I spent some time looking at each of your respective organizations' code of conduct. And I thought that the statements that were made in those pieces of documentation were very powerful. So for example, Leidos, the first sentence is, we set the highest professional and personal expectations. And for SSI, the first statement is, we aim to do the right thing always in our business activities. And then for Manpower, the first statement is, an ethical approach to business has always been a part of our DNA, and we're proud to be doing well by doing good for nearly 70 years. And that's a quote directly from you, Jonas. Mm-hmm. And so sitting here today, in the world we operate in, I think many of us in this room got our alerts yesterday during the course of the day, where there was a sort of an announcement out in Boston about some indictments associated with, I would classify, not sort of opining on the activities, but just to say character, trust issues that were raised in the allegations that were made. I'm very curious to get your perspectives on taking what is sort of the key elements of a code of conduct that every employee gets on their first day of work, and as leaders, essentially bringing your views as ethical leaders to shape and instill values in the culture of your organizations. And so I thought I would start with you, Jonas, first to share your views and experiences, current day.
Thank you, Liban. Yes, no, I think the character of organization is really a combination of the culture, the values, and the purpose of the organization. And we emphasize very clearly and very early on in anybody's career, and keep on re-emphasizing this within our organization, that we embrace the duality of purpose upon which our company was founded more than 70 years ago. Because well before the discussions that we're having today and the urgencies that, that we may see in a number of areas today, our founders in the late 60s talked about the importance of running a really great and successful business, but at the same time never forgetting the impact that we have in the communities in which we work and the responsibilities that we have to the millions of people that work with us all across the world every year. And that is something that we celebrate. We think it's important. We know that this is one of the reasons why individuals come to ManpowerGroup and want to work there, and it's one of the very important reasons why they stay there. So we emphasize this extensively, and we celebrate both aspects of the business in a very, very explicit way. We're explicit about the sustainable development goals that we support. We're explicit about the conduct that we accept and that we don't accept. I think from a culture perspective, it's all about leadership, and the tone at the top is extremely important. We have situations in our business where there might be gray areas and maybe performance is lacking or something like that, and I think those areas sometimes take a bit longer for us to decide on, but in terms of the organization rejecting behavior that is not aligned with our culture, it is very quick. Which is easy to say, not always easy to do. We had a very successful leader in one of our biggest business units that was behaving in a way and producing great results, 40% of our profits, but that behaved in a way that was inconsistent with our behaviors as we want them to be embodied. And to make matters more complicated, this is in a culture where that interpretation may not necessarily be true in that culture. But we removed the leader within 60 days. And we got sued, of course, because it wasn't really part of the way it was supposed to happen in that particular country. But we pressed ahead, and we had to stand by what we believe is right. And I think once the organization sees a few examples of that, the organization will follow and know.
No, that's great to hear. And so Tamara, picking up on that theme of sort of laying out the vision, sort of the goal on a 10,000-foot level and following through with real substantial actions and conduct to sort of show folks what really the vision really means in implementation. If you could share a little bit about your experiences as a leader within your organization as well.
Sure, and thank you. And thank you all for being here today. This is really quite a group. From here, you see how large this room really is. Yeah. So I thought it was great, Levin, that you opened with the first line in our respective codes of conduct, and ours is doing the right thing. And there's an oft-quoted definition of character, which is a person's measure of character can be seen in looking at what they do when they think no one's looking or when they think they won't be found out by what they're doing. And that speaks very much to at least my definition of character, which is we're not born with character. It's not inherited. It is something that we have control over. We get to develop, we get to form, we get to evolve. And that sense of responsibility is something that goes straight through our entire code of conduct. And our business is one that is commodity-based, very cyclical. And so one of the things that we speak about operationally is focusing on the things that we can control, because there are many macroeconomic events, market events that are out of our control. So what we really focus on are those things that we can control. Character is one of them. And so that's why we start with doing the right thing, and it follows all the way through. And just as Jonas was saying, we have our experiences of great culture carriers who are great examples, and leading by example is, I think, the most powerful way of instilling the culture that you want. But we've also had experiences, as I think we have in all of our companies, of people who haven't done the right thing, whether it's been intentionally or negligently. But we've had some really good examples of people who haven't done the right thing, who are disciplined and trained, demoted, but stay with the company and rebuild themselves and become very effective leaders. And those are some of our best examples. We've also, obviously, like Jonas has said, have had examples where termination is the answer, and that's you part ways and you make examples in that way as well. But getting back to the code of conduct and the examples, it is about doing the right thing. It is about taking responsibility. And it aligns very much with our business as well as the way in which we want to conduct business.
And Roger, again, with the theme of sort of doing the right thing, but then with Leidos, the distinction of having a statement that talks about professional integrity and personal integrity, sort of combining that, which is obviously linked. If you could talk a little bit about that and how you have that flow through the organization as well.
Yeah, sure, Levin, thanks. And again, thanks everyone for being here. It's a packed room. It's great. So Leidos, a lot of people probably haven't heard that word. We're actually a 50-year-old company. Interesting, as we think about the code of conduct and how we've evolved, the first 40 years or so, we were employee-owned. And then we went public 2006 to 2009. So we've only been a public company for about 10 years. And our code of conduct, by the way, has evolved over time to be what it is today, but is really much more a reflection of the 32,000 people and how we feel about ourselves and the culture and the character that we want to have in the company than it is sort of an aspirational statement that was written that we want everyone to achieve. We do, like you mentioned, we kind of, on your first day at the company, you go through new employee orientation, you sign the code of conduct, you see a video, and if you happen to be in the Washington, D.C. area, the CEO comes down and presents to the group of new employees. Then one of the things I do is I go through our mission, vision, and values, very much, the purpose of the company, and how we operate in and why we operate in the markets that we're in. And our first value is integrity, which, by the way, we have talked about over time, and it has evolved. That might have been ethics and compliance some years ago, and we went what we think is to a higher plane around integrity and trust and character. And why it's number one is, it's probably true of every business, but especially in our business, the information that we deal with. So we run the healthcare system for the active military. We administer something called VISTA for the VA. In those systems, we have all the medical records for all the active military and every vet in the US. So protecting PHI and PII, really, really important. We do stuff in national security. We do stuff for the Defense Department, frankly, Department of Energy, FAA. We do a lot of air traffic flow. And so having high ethical character and doing things the right way is the coin of the realm. We would be out of business if we lost the trust of our customer. And so it just goes hand in glove. What we expect of each other, what my 32,000 bosses expect of me, and frankly, what I expect of them is really the basis for how we conduct business. And without that, the whole company falls apart. It just comes unwound. And in our sector, kind of in the defense and intel space, unfortunately, there have been recent cases where that trust has been broken. And they've all been headline news, and we've all read about them. And those are devastating to the company, but even more important, horribly devastating for our customer, who therefore can't complete their mission, becomes more complicated. We lose what may be, our competitive advantage in the world. And so the personal conduct, professional conduct, the culture and the character of the company really all blend together to form really the fabric of Leidos as we have today.
So it's interesting, you mentioned the word trust, and so part of the theme of the discussion here and last night is sort of the studies that have shown that employees have a higher regard of trust within the organizations they work in vis-a-vis other parts and fabrics of society in terms of whether it's government or other institutions. And so, my question to you, Jonas, is how do you, within your organization, maintain trust? How do you have trust be sustainable in your organization?
Well, what we try to do is to be very, to be very true to our values and to our purpose and to our culture, and be authentic in that belief, and be very transparent about what it is that we believe is right and what is wrong. And we try to be communicating to the entire organization, either on instances that affect the business or things that are happening in the world that our employees are wondering about, and explaining what our position is and making sure we communicate that in a very clear and specific way. Sometimes it's great news and sometimes it's not so great news. But I think employees and people in general want to know what's going on, and I think it's one way of ensuring that you stay in very close touch with your people and communicate with them and have a dialogue with them about what matters to them and what matters to the company. Yeah. So we have actually quite a systematic approach to establishing those channels of communication, because people want to know. And if they don't know, and if you don't tell them, they will make things up based on what they see and what they hear. Yeah. So it's very important to have that channel open and build the trust in that way.
So Tamara, just to sort of the approach, whether some view sort of an informal approach and style in terms of providing sort of a mechanism to continue to reinforce trust within the organization. Some have a formalized, some do a hybrid, but curious about how you implement that and make it sustainable for your organization.
So I think it is, as Jonas was saying as well, it is, the foundation is communication. Yeah. And it is as being as fulsome in explaining good news as it is in explaining bad news. And being able to explain why and what the rationale is, because I found it very interesting that businesses are much higher on the scale of trust than NGOs and governments and others, because it wasn't that long ago when that was completely reversed. And so why is that happening? I think a lot of it is happening because employees are picking employers who are aligned with them on purpose, on impact, on personal values. And back in the day, we didn't talk about personal values. We may have called it ethics and compliance. When you call it ethics and compliance, it has a completely different, it resonates very differently than when you call it values or when you call it purpose or when you call it even conduct. And so by changing our words and making it more personal and making it the first thing that we talk about when you're a new employee and when you come on board, it raises it to something that is much more important to today's employees. So I think creating that, number one, is really important, and then reinforcing that in everything that you do. So we use a lot of different forms of communication. We don't use social media in our operation, and part of that is because not everybody has access to the same platform. So we do a lot of roundtable discussions at all of our sites, at our work sites. Our chief compliance officer, who's here today, goes out and trains personally, and uses parts of our team to train as well. But that being there in person, particularly when you're dealing with new employees who haven't been in your industry or are just starting in the job, it's very important to get that training personally, because questions that they want to ask may not come across in a town hall meeting or may not be answered on solely online training. So I encourage that type of impact to be made and to continue. But at the end of the day, while we have articulated our values and our code of conduct and what we expect to our employees, they also understand we're running a business, so that when they have requests, whether it's budgets or CapEx or days off or whatever it is, we can't always meet their requests. So giving them the bad news or giving them the negative news and giving them the reason why and being consistent with that same level of information is just as important as having the town halls to celebrate the good information. And I think that's very important in creating a trust level.
No, that's very interesting. And Roger, we were talking earlier about sort of employees and sort of their selection of places to work and sort of the mission and values that people bring to their work. And so connecting with the sort of the trust discussion that you mentioned earlier in terms of the nature of the work you do, and your organization does, the sensitivity of the information, is it something that's already part of that process for the individual employee coming in, recognizing they're working on very sensitive, confidential information when they come to an organization such as yours?
Yeah, we may have an advantage at Leidos because it's very visible what we do and what we work on. We work on programs for the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. We work on Department of Energy. The people who tend to come to work, by the way, we have 25% or so are veterans. Maybe another 10% are either spouses of veterans or civilian employees of government agencies. And so they come to the company kind of understanding what we do and the importance of the mission and how important trust, security, integrity is relative to what we do. I want to go back, though, a little bit to the index. I was a little bit surprised that corporate America has done so well. And again, as we were kind of talking, why are we so much better than NGOs and government and the media? And reflect on it just a bit, maybe for a minute. So this is my 41st year, kind of in corporations, and I got a business degree back in the 80s, and I know when I was in school, it was all about shareholder value, right? And that's what we were taught. It's, the reason that a corporation exists, the sole reason that we are here is to create value for the shareholders. And I think because of that, we got the employees and the shareholders and the regulators that we deserved, right? It was, if that's all you care about, then you don't care about me as an employee, you don't care about my customer mission, you don't care about the communities in which you operate, and therefore we're going to deal with you in that way. And I think over that time, 30 years, 40 years, I think, quote, corporate America has figured it out, that no, we're here for a lot more than shareholder value. We're here for kind of stakeholder value, and our customers, our employees, communities in which we work, our supplier base are as important an element of what we do as the people who actually go out and buy our stock, right? And as such, I think corporate America has gotten better at the way we run corporations and the way we deal with, we call it ESG, that seems to be the buzzword today, but this whole constituency writ large. And every year, I think we all learn from each other. We see a corporation that is got an issue, and we kind of study what did they do, how did they react to that, did they do the right thing, are they communicating, are they being transparent? And I think all of us get better. And what's been exciting, and in the Edelman index, you see that the corporations that are trusted by their employees have a better financial return. The fact is, it's the right way to run a business, and we are rewarded by business success in doing those things. And it goes hand in glove. You say, wouldn't you do it anyway, even if it wasn't good for business? So, yes, we would, but it's recognized, it attracts the employees that you want. It attracts the customers that want to do business with you. By the way, it attracts your suppliers, the people. I know last night in the hall, I looked around at the banners and I went, wow, many of those people are in my supply chain. And those are the companies that I do business with. And I didn't even know that they were recognized, but it is the relationship I want with people. It's the people I want to invite into the company and be our partners. So it really is the coin of the realm. It is the way we build an enduring company. And I think it's just terrific that in the Edelman survey that the data comes back and says, hey, corporate America, you're doing a lot right. But I think it's because we have evolved into a different space from where we might have been 30 or 40 years ago, where maybe we weren't doing the right things.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. At EY, we've done studies regarding culture and sort of how does one put sufficient metrics around something that's intangible, and how does that link to performance and innovation. And our studies have shown that there is a link, and having that good corporate governance, a good culture, doing the right thing, promoting ethics, reinforcing that helps the bottom line ultimately. And it's shown time and time again in terms of how people perceive their work and what they do on a daily basis to achieve the company's goals. But our conversation sort of triggered a thought in my mind in terms of the concept of doing the right thing and sort of the pressure points that you all face as CEOs in your organization in this moment of time, where studies have shown that CEOs, employees expect CEOs to take positions in advance of government, where government hasn't come up with the right solution. They want their leadership within their organizations to propose things in advance. And so whether it's issues dealing with immigration or issues dealing with climate change that are part of the environmental discussion not only here in the United States, but around the world, I'm curious about how your own views sort of, how do you bring your views and how do you sort of work those views to the extent you do to communicate issues internally and then with your teams externally if appropriate?
Thank you. When I look at, when you look at the spectrum, some companies and CEOs will say nothing about anything for fear of offending various stakeholders, because as businesses, we deal with lots of people and organizations that have different opinions. And then the other side of the spectrum is, personal opinions about anything that may happen and where the CEO may have an opinion. And I think as we look at our organization and my view, what I'm comfortable with is really to relate the issues that we may be facing, that we may be reading about, to the company and what effect it would have on the company based on our values and our mission and the work that we do. So we would definitely have an opinion on Brexit. And we have an opinion on Brexit based on what we think it does for the country as it relates to access to a skilled and talented workforce over time, and the image it portrays of a country saying, no, we're not really interested in people from that part of the world, but we're very interested in people from this part of the world, or not that either. And you can see how it immediately translates into flows of immigration and who's applying to come in and who isn't anymore. It would apply to issues around gender diversity and diversity and inclusion, founded in our understanding of what's happened with the demographics, and that diversity of thought, in our view, drives better business outcomes, because in a time where environments are changing rapidly, you want to have diversity of thought, and you need to have all of the talent participate at all levels of the organization so that you get disruptive thinking ingrained in your company. So we would be very vocal to our internal audience for sure, and also to our external audience, because it's a point of view that is based in how we think about this from a company perspective. So that's most of our positions that we would take would be framed in that way. Because I think as a CEO, I have personal opinions that really aren't relevant to the organization. They're not relevant or representing the company, and it is my role to represent the company and the collective of all of our people and the organization and our work. So that's sort of the filter that I apply. So when you see us come out and say something about an event or an occurrence, on elections, for instance, we are absolutely apolitical. We work with everybody in 80 countries, regardless of where they are. But if there are policies that we think go against, good workforce development issues and/or the values that we stand for in terms of diversity of inclusion, we speak out, and that's the platform that we would. That's how we would think about those positions and how we take them inside the company as well as outside.
That's very interesting. And so, Tamara, how do you manage through those pressure points and aligning it back to the values and views of the organization?
So I think the principles that Jonas just articulated are true. I think where CEOs can get in trouble is when they use the company as a personal platform. Mm-hmm. And there was, I think, in the 80s, the celebrity CEO and the culture of the CEO. And I think corporate America has moved past that. Mm-hmm. I think that there are issues where CEOs may have personal perspectives that affect the company that may be different than what the company's perspective is. And if you look at the Federal Reserve Bank and you listen to a Federal Reserve governor, you will often hear them make a speech and say, these are my personal opinions that I'm giving you regarding my outlook on the economy. This is not the opinion of the Federal Reserve Bank in and of itself. So that's a great that's a great way of addressing it. It may or may not be where that individual votes, but it is what that individual is thinking at the time. And I think that's important. But those, again, are comments regarding an issue or issues that relate to that platform, as opposed to personal opinions about things that aren't relevant to the business. So I think that CEOs need to be diligent when they are articulating positions, that they are aligned with either the company's purpose or strategic direction, so that the diverse stakeholders, whether they're employees or suppliers or customers or the board or different groups of employees, understand the rationale behind it. And I think using that principle it will stand everyone in good stead.
Yeah. No, and Roger, you mentioned sort of, the term of the day being, ESG and managing through the issues that may be raised as a result of that, and just curious on your views, not just on that, but other areas in terms of these issues. Yeah.
Well, think of it sort of as concentric circles.
Yeah.
So just because I'm thinking real time while y'all are talking, but think of my world. So I put myself at the at the center of that circle, and then I have certain values and character that I came to the job with. And I'm not going to do anything that I'm not comfortable with. And if we get to that point, then the board can find another CEO. So there's just, if I don't agree and it's better for the company, then it's probably better for the company to find another CEO because I am who I am and I walk in with that. The next layer is probably the board. And there's a lot of issues that come up that we have a great discussion with the board because I want to get a sense of the board. What do they think? What do they think the company should do? Should we take a stand? Some of them are easy, LGBTQ, gender diversity. The shutdown is one that comes to mind that we were pretty adamant at calling that the shutdown was probably not a good thing. Separating children at the border was something we took a big stand on. We do a lot of work for the Department of Homeland Security, and we got to the point we just thought we needed to say something. Then the next ring is sort of our employees, what are the employee issues, and then it kind of expands to customers and the communities in which we work. One of the things I have reflected on, the advantage of us is the speed at which we can move and the agility that we have and how we can mobilize faster than, say, government or regulation. I know you worked at the SEC. They're always, years and years and years behind. Opioids is one that we got really behind. I got an email from an employee that said, a couple years ago, that said, well, what are you doing about the opioid epidemic? And we do about a quarter of our business is in healthcare. And I walked down and talked to our head of public affairs, and I said, what opioid epidemic? And so we started doing some research, and it really hadn't broken as a issue. And we went, oh my gosh, 75,000 people a year are dying of overdose, primarily because of time-release morphine. And the government hasn't quite figured this out yet, and the regulation's not there, and there's still cases in the court, but we can mobilize fast, right? And so we took a stand, and we created a CEO challenge. We reached out to other corporations, and we channeled some of our charitable contributions to organizations to do awareness, prevention, and cure. And I think it's kind of the responsibility of organizations like ours to, when we recognize a problem, to go and move fast. And when we do those things, when we act the right way and we behave, I think, consistently, our employees see that it contributes to trust. They know that we're going to be on the right side of the right issues. And I think it builds the culture of the company. I would comment, though, Tamara, I think you made a great point. It's a complicated landscape, and you have to pick and choose. You have to have, I think, a reason for taking an issue. And then a last comment about a CEO. There are probably a lot of issues that I have opinions on, but I tend to keep most of those opinions to myself, as long as, if you will, the opinions of the company and the culture and the character of the company are consistent with mine, I'm okay. But I also think, because, and I think you all understand this, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I am the CEO of Leidos. So if I'm in the grocery store, I'm the CEO of Leidos. And what I say when I'm in the grocery store is as relevant as what I say when I'm on the dais here. And so we have to be very, very careful about a comment that you might make offhanded, by the way, especially today with social media, because you're always being recorded. And you may get emotional, you may say something. You have to be a little bit careful about that, because that will come back. And it will be associated above the fold, not so much with you, but with
the company.
Roger Krohn, the CEO of Leidos, said. Yeah. And we all have to be careful about that.
No doubt about that, and sort of the key risk of reputational risk and people taking things completely out of context, especially in the social media-driven environment that we're in. I want to pivot a little bit, because we've had this discussion about trust, integrity, and character, and how employees really do feel that their organizations are organizations they work with are trustworthy. There's this flip side, I think, within that, which is even though we're in a period of relatively low unemployment, there's this constant discussion about automation and a discussion about innovation and a digital world. And so I'm curious, and particularly with you, Jonas, in terms of the work that you all do, this sort of, from what I've seen and experienced, sort of this fear that in our workforce, folks feel as though their jobs may be just gone, and in terms of an automation perspective. And wondering how that sort of conversation takes place, especially the work that you do in your organization in terms of managing expectations, having conversations with folks about skill sets and evolving and training and transitioning.
Yeah, no, it's a great topic, and I think a lot of the things we see happening in the world, maybe unilateralism, protectionism, and populism, to a great degree is founded in a polarization of the workforce between haves and have-nots. And a lot of the have-nots, in terms of skills, are worried about their futures and the future of their children and the future of their friends, as it relates to their ability to participate and enjoy a good life and having meaningful and sustainable employment going forward. And within that context, certainly globalization is a key structural change, but also the impact of technology. And this would be a great example where we as ManpowerGroup take a position based on the evidence that we know and that we see, which is we talk a lot about, and we have a lot of fear about jobs that are being destroyed, but all of the evidence so far, historically, as well as in today's world, is indicating that job destruction is offset by job creation. So there might be times when they are out of sync, so more jobs are getting destroyed than are being created. But over the long term, historically as well as in today's world, you've all read about the impact of technology and manufacturing and the job losses. And there's not a country in the developed world that hasn't lost 35% of their manufacturing workforce in the last 15 years. Yet at this point in time, we're at a 50-plus year unemployment low, and we're at a 15-year European unemployment low. So for all of the jobs that have been lost to automation, more jobs have been created in a population and a workforce that's been growing. And this is also true historically. So we feel, so we try to look at the evidence and ensure that, we move the conversation from the fear of job losses due to technology and globalization and move instead to the area which is and should be of tremendous concern to all of us, which is to take advantage of globalization and technology. You need to augment the skills of the workforce. And people who have the right skills can achieve more than they ever thought possible with the help of technology and in a global environment. And those that don't are going to be subject to changes that will make them worse off potentially going forward. So we're trying to shift the conversation to the need for a skills revolution in our country and in lots of other countries, as opposed to this fear about, what are we doing with all the people that are going to be, not having enough to do, and let's talk about introducing basic income and paying people while they're not working, which we think is immensely corrosive to the dignity of work and to the dignity of, how people feel about themselves. Because having a job is much more than making money. It's about self-worth. It's about feeling that you're contributing to society and feeling that you're contributing to your communities. So it's a great example of that shift, because we are firm believers that there will be, job losses due to automation, but there's going to be much, much more displacement due to a workforce that doesn't have the skill sets to take advantage of the changes that are happening today. And when you think back historically, every industrial revolution, moving from an agrarian society to an industrial society, moving from an industrial society to post-industrial society, has always been accompanied by significant changes in education, except this time. We roughly educate our kids the same way we educated them 50 years ago. It's a linear process, time-based, 12 plus 3 plus 2 plus nothing, and then you're out into the workforce. When we moved from an agrarian society to an industrial society, we introduced compulsory schooling by law. Every kid has to go to school, no more farm work. Everybody needs to have a base education. Post-Second World War, the ability to take a degree, post-secondary education took off, and we have a whole system that's built up around that. Yet this time, we've not made the changes to a more rapidly evolving environment, and we think that's one of the defining challenges of our time, ensuring that we upskill and reskill the workforce at scale. And in our recent research, which is very encouraging, and I think it goes back to the discussion we've had with Tamara and Roger, companies are taking much greater interest in reskilling and upskilling their workforce. And just over the last 5 years, when we asked employers in the US, are you investing in reskilling and upskilling your workforce? 20% of the organizations say, yeah, no, we're really taking it seriously. When we did the same survey this year, 70% of companies and organizations said, no, this is really a business critical mission. We have to reskill, retain our people, reskill them, increase their skills portfolio so that they can help us achieve everything that we want to achieve and help themselves at the same time. So that's a really encouraging and very, very similar to the trend that you saw on trust. But I think that's going to be the challenge, and we believe that's the defining challenge of our time.
No, it's a very interesting point you made. It's a symbiotic relationship, quite frankly, right? With the development and having that journey from a skill transformation perspective,
Yep.
having the organization benefit from that.
Yeah.
Tamara, in terms of your experience, I know you've served in an advisory committee capacity on trade policy, and so that perspective, I think, would be very interesting for you to share with us in terms of that natural tension and how that aligns within your organization and views and addressing concerns that employees have too.
Sure. I was going to mention that earlier when you were talking about taking stands. So just as background, the company that I run is in two businesses. We manufacture steel, and I will guess that most people in this audience are not aware that steel is the most recycled commodity in the world. There's more steel recycled than plastic, paper, glass, and aluminum combined every year. The steel in your car probably came from a washing machine, or came from, or the steel came from demolition in this building, or the building across the street that's being built. That steel came from washing machines and cars and turnings from manufacturing. So steel is a very, very important, metals are a very, very important part to our development, whether it's in your iPhone or whether it's in your transportation vehicle or whether it's in the building that you live in or work in. And the other part of my business recycles metals. And that is the biggest part of my business. And again, probably not known to most people in the audience, is that 2/3 of the steel made in the United States, 2/3 is made with recycled metal. And excluding China, almost 50% of the world's steel manufactured is made using recycled metals. So trade is very important to us, but also our ability to operate recycling facilities is very important. And everybody is very in favor of recycling and sustainability. You saw it last night with sponsors, and you see it and hear about it every day. But one of our biggest challenges is while everyone wants to recycle, not everybody wants a recycling facility in their neighborhood. It's called NIMBY, not in my backyard. But having a recycling facility 1,000 miles away from any urban environment is problematic because the material is generated in urban or manufacturing environments, not in not in undeveloped forest land or the like. So one of the challenges we have is really educating our communities about the work that we do. And that also leads to educating people about trade. And I sit on the President's Advisory Committee for Trade Policy and Negotiation. I was appointed by President Obama, and I was reappointed by President Trump. And so there's a constant theme there across administrations, which is the belief that we are all entitled to a level playing field. And we're all entitled to operate globally in an environment of fair trade and hopefully free trade. And so my role on that committee is to represent our company's views and industry views regarding the importance and what can be done to set that level playing field. And I think that it goes back to education in the broadest sense, which is educating our stakeholders regarding what that means definitely influences the stand that we take. And because we're a big exporter of materials, we have been feeling both the benefits of the recent trade actions as well as the constraints that they've caused as well. And so I feel that we actually have a very balanced view on that.
Oh, that's great. And then, Roger, in terms of sort of this future workforce and science and technology and expectations that are going to increase, I'm curious sort of your vision and views of making sure and within your organization that you're positioned to have the adequate talent to be able to meet the challenges of tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, we like to think of ourselves as a technology company, and we primarily have IT engineering and science in everything that we do. By the way, we view the advent of technology and Moore's Law and Metcalfe's Law as a huge opportunity. I know there's a lot of maybe fear and trepidation about where we're going, but what we're doing with technology is, I like to say, we're replacing the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous. And those jobs come out, and Jonas, as you were saying, these really fun, kind of high-tech, high-value-added jobs move in their place. And where we used to reconfigure a network by going in the back of the server panel and pulling wires and replacing the wires, we now do it with software. So we would never, ever, ever do that again. We can do it all from a terminal. We can design a robot that actually does that for us. A lot of the mundane jobs that we have, like even in our own company in accounts receivables, we don't have an accounts receivable clerk anymore. We have a bot that does that. And that's moving up the value stream and adding more value-added work. And we're more efficient, and we're hopefully a better company for it. I think what it does is create that concern with the employee base. And kind of in my lifetime, I think we've moved from one construct to another in maybe more my dad's time, or maybe when I hired. There was this thing about the contract with your employees, and did you have lifetime employment, and what does that meant? And I got a job with a big aerospace company, and my parents were so thrilled because I got a defined benefit plan, and I got a savings plan, and they assumed that I would be there for life. I mean, that doesn't really exist today, right? You don't have a contract of employment for life. The way we like to look at it is our contract with our employees is that we will partner with you to make you employable for life, okay? And so that means that we will offer continuing education and tuition reimbursement programs and massively online open courses and certification programs, and we will make that available in all different kinds of formats, in classrooms, online, through supplements at colleges and universities and the places where we are. But the employee has to meet us halfway, right? We will help to define what the jobs of the future are, where our needs are. By the way, all of our open jobs are posted on our internal intranet site. By the way, we actually keyword search resumes on Workday when we have an opening to see if we can find someone in the company who has those skills before we go outside. But the employee has a responsibility here as well. If you're a COBOL programmer and you don't want to learn C++, there will be a point in time when there are no COBOL programs, hopefully in my lifetime, but no COBOL programs yet to be reprogrammed. And we try to communicate that. We try to let our employees know sort of where we're headed, where technology is headed. And again, we provide that opportunity for continuing education. One interesting kind of fact there is, in my career, it used to be we all wanted to get degrees. So we would get master's degrees, or we'd get online, MBAs and things like that. And that was the predominance of what we did on tuition reimbursement. And what we find today, especially with millennials, they don't want to spend 2 years or 3 years studying one thing. And so what we've seen is the rise of certificated programs. Like we'll have a Linux certificate or Microsoft 10, Windows 10 certificate, and those are extremely popular. And they lead to a piece of paper people can put on their resume, but the idea of, okay, you need an MBA or you need a master's here or you need a PhD, that's perhaps not as prevalent as it used to be. And trying to match continuing education with the technology and the needs of our employees is something I think we pride ourselves on.
And I'll just make a comment with respect to that. I think this whole move of companies not only supporting the changing desires of employees in terms of education is important, but working with community colleges, state colleges, localized educational institutions where we work is really critical. And it's no different than investments we make in our own operating supply chain.
Right.
To make investments in our HR supply chain, which is our employees, means investing in local education institutions, because it's not about everybody having an MBA anymore. It is much more about experiential or certificated skill sets that are very different than what we saw in, let's say, the last generation of workers.
Yeah.
No, it's an excellent point, and again, it reinforces the theme of value investing, building culture, ethics, which all ties together. And so, to close, I'm mindful of the time that we have. We have a room full of tremendous professionals who are leaders in their organizations that help the organizations achieve their performance goals, but also play a critical role in developing the ethics and compliance culture within their organizations. And so at EY, a lot of times within our own integrity practice, one of the first questions folks ask us is, what can we do better? What are others doing? Can you share with us some anecdotes? And so I'd like to close with each of you providing a piece of advice for the folks in this room to help mobilize their teams to be able to continue to strive to achieve a goal of continued excellence in terms of compliance and ethics. And I'll start with you, Jonas, if you could share just one piece.
Well, one of the easiest ones was fairly evident on the, on the various banners yesterday. Mm-hmm. Because as I looked at all the banners on a per capita basis, I think one of the best ways to get on this list is by basing your company in Milwaukee or in the state of Wisconsin. I see Rockwell Automation, I see Oshkosh, yes. I see Johnson Controls, and I see Kohl's, a great retailer represented in a state of 6 million people. So I'm thinking that would be the first thing to remember.
The statistics show that, absolutely.
Yes, the statistics show that, yes. And I was hoping you'd bring that up.
I should have thought
Yeah, you should have thought about that, but never mind. This is going to be an evolution and a continued area of focus for a lot of organizations. And I think that the trends that are going in this direction are not about to abate, they're about to increase in strength. So as organizations, you always have to think about what it is that you can do better. And I would like to think that we're doing a lot of things right at ManpowerGroup, but I am under no illusion. There are many areas that we still have gaps. There are many areas where we still need to improve. Based on our understanding of the workforce, we think one of the biggest levers for organizations is to really drive a culture of diversity and inclusion. We think it's really important for the business because you want to have diverse ideas in an environment that is changing very quickly, and you want to, just as Tamara and Roger talked about, bring up your own workforce and make it as part of your value proposition as an employer brand. You want to be known as a place where people can come and they can identify with your company, but they can also come there and acquire the skills that they need to be successful within the company, but also outside of the company. So we're committed to continuing on our path. We're certainly not done, but I don't think any organization is. I think it's a question of continuing to push the envelope.
Okay, Tamara.
So before I answer the question, can I just see a show of hands? How many compliance officers or people who have oversight responsibility for compliance are in the audience? Okay, all right. So then I'll answer the question this way, which is that I think there are three really important things that can increase, and certainly our Chief Compliance Officer, Kelly Pappas, is in the front row right here. Certainly,
right there.
we're driven right in
right
the
there.
red, right there.
Right there.
Certainly made our program and our culture effective. And that is one, being accessible. Mm-hmm. And I mean that not just physically, and I'll get to that in a moment, but not using corporate speak. Making what we say really relatable to what people are doing. Mm-hmm. And the more corporate speak that is embedded in materials, the less it resonates, the less authentic it is. So I would say that number is first. Second, our CCO is part of our executive team. And that has created a great dialogue, good debate, good solutions, good ideas, good innovation. And I think elevating that position is very important in an organization. And then third is getting out there, staying in corporate, which is where most compliance officers are based, and issuing things by email is not the most effective. And I know that when Callie joined our organization, or at least it wouldn't have been the most effective for us, we have over 100 sites in North America, and I think she visited every single one. And it wasn't just one and done. She is on the road a big part of her of her time. She's on the road at our facilities, giving out ethics in action awards, or doing training, or just being there. And I think those three things make the role more impactful. It is a tough role, and so I applaud all of you for what you do, because I think you're making all of us better, because we feed on we feed on each other. We take examples from each other. We're all leading by example for our global community, not just our own employee base. So thank you very much to all of you.
So my personal journey is probably parallels the journey within the defense and aerospace industry. And I think when I started out in 1978, I don't think we signed a code of conduct. I don't think we even knew what a code of conduct was. We just assumed we were making equipment for the military and everybody would do the right thing. And then we went through an era with, a $100 coffee pot and a hammer that cost, and by the way, that was because of cost accounting and really complicated stuff. But we kind of looked at that and we said, it just doesn't seem right, right? And so we reacted to the moment, and every one of our peers, probably including us, we put in a program and we named someone and we did this and we did that. We're very, very reactive, right? And what the fear was, okay, we got through that. Now we can go back to the way we were. And I think what we've seen and what really works, holistically is now we're proactive, right? Now it's our conversation. Our head of internal audit, our head of ethics and compliance is on the leadership team. We don't have a meeting without that presence in every decision that we make. We have a committee of the board that's oriented towards ethics and compliance and ESG and our role in the community. We talk about it all the time. It's in our annual report. It's on our webpage. Every time I speak, it comes up as a subject. And so it's not an and, it's not an or thing. It's almost not even an and thing. It is what we are, right? It is the dialogue. It is the fabric of the company. It is what we talk about all the time. It guides us in our decisions. It helps us in our resource allocation. And we walk away from a lot of business because as a team, we kind of look around and we go, boy, that would be a great opportunity. And we kind of go, but that's not what we do. It's just not who we are. It's not where we want to be. It's either a country we don't want to do business in because we don't like the playing field in the country. It could be a part of a business where it just doesn't fit with who we think we are and where we want to be positioned. But it's the fact that you have this conversation, not just at the Ethics and Compliance Board meeting or once a year when you go through the mandatory ethics and compliance training, is that you actually come to work every day and every decision that you make, you think about, is this consistent with my personal values, with the values of the corporation, with where we want to be positioned? Is this who we are? And it guides you. And when you do that, then it just becomes part of the fabric. And by the way, you can be more confident that the ethical missteps that are bound to happen, because you got 32,000 people, and we probably separate between 25 and 50 individuals a year who don't quite get it and violate a rule. So you know that's going to be there. But if you have that kind of dialogue and you create the fabric that way, most of the time this is going to be automatic. You're going to do the right thing. And then you'd have to have a control system in place to catch the 0.1% of people who don't. But I'm really optimistic. And the message for all of us is to keep the conversation up. And by the way, you can't do ethics and compliance by staying in your office, right? So you need to get out. You need to go out to the plant. You need to go out to the Four Winds. You need to fly to Australia if that's where you need to go. And you need to carry that conversation to where the work gets done.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Greatly appreciate it. I would ask everyone to join me to thank Roger and Tamara and Jonas for the conversation.
Thank you.